All right, welcome everybody. Hi, I'm Paul Grand. I'm the CEO here at MedTech Innovator. This is part of the MedTech Innovator Asia Pacific webinar series that we do each year for our cohort, as well as for anyone who's interested in learning more about medical innovation. MedTech Innovator is an accelerator. We're actually the largest accelerator of medical technology in the entire world. Our focus here is to find companies, the best companies all over the world that are developing the emerging technologies that we all want to see in healthcare and making sure those technologies successfully reach patients. So what we do as part of the MedTech Innovator Accelerator program is we run a webinar series every year. And this is a really great opportunity for us to bring some of the world's experts to you, whether you are part of our cohort who's here today on Zoom, or whether you're tuning in on YouTube Live. This is an opportunity for you to learn from the experts. We like to say we're bringing the world's best ecosystem to the world's best startups. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that I think is really important, which is strategic partnerships and working with multinationals. A lot of people think that this is something that you should wait and you shouldn't talk to the strategics and the multinationals until much later in your development, and they want to stay in stealth mode. And oftentimes that turns out to be a really bad idea because people develop their technology, and when they finally get in front of some of these companies for potential partnerships, they find that what they're offering isn't something that the other party is interested in. And so a lot of the opportunity is to engage early with these companies and make sure you're doing something that they're going to be interested in and is going to be beneficial for all of us. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, learning from some of the experts in the field. Our MC for today is going to be our Managing Director, Frederick Nyberg. So he'll be taking the reins from here, and I'll be leading some of our other webinars. So with that, I will turn it over to Frederick, and he can introduce our panelists for today.
Very good. Thank you so much, Paul. Good morning, everyone that are based here in Asia Pacific. Good evening, those of you dialing in from North America. And welcome to this second webinar in our series. And as Paul said, this is the topic for today is strategic partnerships and working with multinationals. Just a quick reminder, we are live streaming the first hour of this session on YouTube. So welcome to our YouTube viewers. What we did at the beginning of our accelerator program was we conducted a survey amongst our cohort participants. So it's essentially your replies to those questions that are guiding today's discussion. And you will all have, those of you in the cohort, you will have the opportunity to stay on after the 1 hour for the closed door Q&A session. Quick instruction as well to our cohort. Please, you will have access to the Q&A and the chat buttons at the bottom of your screen. So please, if you have any questions, enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. If you have and I will typically address that at the end of the session during our Q&A session. And if you have comments that you'd like to make, something that you'd like to ask the panelists during the first hour broadcast, you're welcome to put that into the chat. So that's how that will work. I will then call on you so you can ask the questions in person during the last 30 minutes or so. Right. Well, as Paul said, we have an excellent panel today and a really interesting topic, and I'm thrilled to introduce to you Florian Belohlavek from Siemens Healthineers, Head of Strategy for Asia Pacific. He'll introduce himself in a moment, and Stephen Lee from Johnson & Johnson. Welcome to both of you. Florian, I believe, is based here in Singapore, where I am with Sakina, and Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're dialing in from Hong Kong, is that right?
That's correct, Frederick.
Excellent. So maybe I'll ask each of you to just provide a brief introduction of yourself, of your company, your role at that company, and maybe some areas of key strategic interest for your business. And maybe Stephen, I'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Frederick. And thanks for the introduction. So I'm Stephen Lee. I'm the Director of Early Innovation Partnering for North Asia, working for the Asia Pacific Innovation Center for JNJ Innovation. I cover Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong across the three sectors that JNJ has a footprint in, and that's, of course, pharmaceutical, consumer healthcare, but also medical device. I also have responsibility across the region in APAC for MedTech opportunities, as well as our vision care related early innovation opportunities. So looking forward to this panel discussion.
Great, thanks. And maybe I'll ask you to comment briefly on some particular areas of strategic interest for Johnson & Johnson in the region. We'll get to talk more about this, of course, later during the panel.
Sure. For the MedTech space, we have 4 franchises, which includes our Ethicon business, our CSS business, and also our diffuse synthesis business, and also vision care business. Across these 4 franchises, we have different platforms. So for the Ethicon business, we're looking for essentially first-in-class or best-in-class opportunities in the OR, so surgical instruments, things of that nature. For CSS, this will be more for our cardiovascular-related interventional innovations. For diffuse synthesis, we're one of the largest orthopedic companies out there, and we are looking for innovations in that space addressing the needs of the orthopedic surgeons and the patients. Vision care, for them, again, it's about the medical devices, addressing things like myopia, presbyopia, novel solutions to address issues related to contact lens, glaucoma. We also have a vision surgical business. They're also interested in solutions to address things like glaucoma and others. And we'll go into it in more in-depth once we start the panel discussion.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that background, Stephen. Florian, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Frederick, for having me in that panel discussion. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Yeah, as Frederick mentioned, my name is Florian Belohlavek. I'm heading the strategy team within Siemens Healthineers Asia Pacific. So covering most of the activities when it comes to the strategic approach here in Asia Pacific, but also the business development. In addition to that, also covering the marketing and sales enablement activities here in Asia Pacific. So a quite broad approach. So who we are, Siemens Healthineers. I think most of you know the company from the great machines called CT, MRs, and so on, where we are innovation leader and in most areas also the market leader in that element. But looking into the whole portfolio, so we are covering diagnostic imaging with the topics I mentioned, CT, MR, PET, X-ray, and all that imaging solutions, helping to do a proper diagnosis. In addition to that, we are also having the field of advanced therapy, so everything what it's related to cardiology, angio, and in addition to that, covering the stroke, neuro field in that particular more clinical-driven business area in our portfolio. The third element is then called lab diagnostics, divided into lab diagnostic in the particular area, but also point of care offerings. And the newest kid on the block is our newest acquisition, which is Varian. So we are happy to expand our offerings when it comes to oncology solutions. And maybe we have the chance to talk about Varian and what we did a little bit more in detail during that session, because that's quite exciting what we do here. So that's our company. And where we are interested in when it comes to the startup community and looking into innovations, it's mainly driven by our approach that we have a dedicated portfolio. So we are looking in adjacent fields, of course. That means bringing additional benefits to our offerings. in the field of imaging, diagnostic, and therapy. But in particular, we are looking into solution when it comes, of course, to software offerings. That means post-processing with AI, looking into different fields where we see a potential to enhance the diagnostic pathways, looking into clinical pathway options, so helping to improve the diagnostic outcome, and also looking into the different clinical fields like the topics we are covering at the moment with oncology, cardio, and neuro, which are the main interest for us. Another element is, of course, we also try to drive the innovation when it comes to robotic solutions. That is a very interesting field where we see a big hype at the moment also when it comes to innovative solutions in the area of imaging and also to the automation of labs, for example. So this is another field where we are quite interested in at the moment. So,
Great, thank you very much for that that background, Florian. I think that's very, very useful for our audience here. Now, looking at the broader medtech industry across Asia Pacific, I think many of you have read the various McKinsey reports stating that it's really just a matter of time before Asia-Pac becomes larger than Europe, larger than the European market. And I think in their latest report, it's I think the timeline they're given is 2023 is when it's going to happen. What are some of the areas that each of you see in Asia Pacific that is driving growth in medtech? And maybe I'll add the question there is, given now the pandemic, how has that accelerated innovation, and in what areas? And maybe I'll start with Stephen there.
Yeah, it's interesting times and exciting times for the region in the medtech space. Region used to be the manufacturing hub for the medical device industry, especially coming from China. But I think those CMOs are now stepping up and becoming innovators themselves, and partly due to the changes in the socioeconomics, the demographics, and of course the current COVID pandemic that's affecting us. So areas where I see some interesting trends, of course, the big data and the AI aspect, just because there's so much out there, especially China, huge amount of big data that a lot of startups are leveraging to develop innovative solutions, digital solutions to address the medical unmet needs. That's a very interesting areas to monitor, and we certainly are keeping active tabs on that. With the growing elderly population in the region, and I don't know what the numbers are right now, but it is quite significant. You can see diseases related to the age that's going to creep up here, and we are preparing ourselves to find solutions to better address these, anything from osteoarthritis to, say, joint-related diseases. You can see hip replacement potentially. You can see, like I said, OA. And how do we address those with better and novel solutions? Then I also think that lifestyle is changing, and you have more middle-income demographics that's going up through the ladder, so to speak, and enjoying more sports-related activities, but that also leads to sports-related injuries. I play tennis quite a bit, and I know that I have this rotator cuff issues. I imagine something like that would also go high. So how do we, as a medtech industry, address those situations better, quicker, and more efficiently? So those are the areas that I see. I find it very interesting.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Florian, your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting and a broad topic. I think I can cover the next 60 minutes talking about that one, because that's what I'm doing a lot of.
Yeah, we'll keep it maybe to 2 minutes for now.
But looking into the numbers, because we are all at the moment also looking into that one. What does it mean for us? Yeah, but if you look into the population, 60% of the global population are in Asia already. in 2030, we are talking about 2/3 of all the elderly older than 60 are coming from Asia. So these are trends which are directly connected to what we are doing here. MedTech for imaging is already, so Asia Pacific MedTech market is already the biggest market. So for us, it is already a huge focus. But why I'm spending so much time with it on a strategic aspect of that, because we are, when you look into the past, we had a clear focus on US. US is the big driver for innovations, and Europe came maybe second. But what we see that will not work in the future anymore. So we have customers in Asia Pacific who are expecting a solution which is fitted to their demands, to their needs. And there are already a lot of local players who have already offerings in that space. So we have to change the way how we see Asia Pacific internally and focus and reshape our focus when it comes to Asia Pacific. And the pure innovation power is looking into the unicorns. Also, like 40% of the global unicorns are already coming from Asia Pacific. I know the numbers because I'm really looking into that one at the moment, getting a better understanding, also teaching our management in the end how that trend is already turning into the direction of Asia Pacific. And the future is now, as also stated in the McKinsey report. Asia is already on some areas on the forefront. And here to just mention some of examples, all that remote diagnosis and remote appointments with doctors and so on. Here, Asia Pacific, in particular China, is on the forefront. They are leading in that areas. Using the 5G technology, so we already implemented solutions only for China to connect in that middle of the pandemic to a CT system in Wuhan, connected to doctors in a completely different remote location to get the proper diagnosis done. So these are only some of the examples, and it's not only China. We see it also in, for example, Australia, where we are collaborating with the Stroke Alliance in Australia to bring up solutions to have a computer tomography system placed in a mobile stroke unit to bring the diagnosis closer to the patient and where the stroke happens, for example, to already triage where it's going, in which direction the diagnosis and then the treatment is heading to. So these are only a few examples where we already see the pure dynamic of innovations coming from Asia. And AI is another one where I clearly see a lot of traction here, and very good examples where innovators from Asia Pacific already showed that they are able to come up with solutions which are not only serving the Asia Pacific market, but then also scaling into the global market and the next step.
Yeah, great point. Thanks for that, Florian. I think you're absolutely right. The days when products and innovation in MedTech happen in Europe and the US only, and they were defeatured and brought to Asia Pacific, those days are long gone. So that's a great point. Now let's
comment a bit more.
Yeah, of course, Stephen.
Telemedicine, Frederick. I mean,
of course.
You're asking what has the COVID pandemic, how has it affected the MedTech industry? I think telemedicine is a great example how, here's a technology that's been around for a while, but because of the pandemic, it's been highlighted and more people have utilized this. And a lot of people are asking, is this here to stay? And I think so. I sometimes compare it against something like electronic payment system, PayPal, for example. I remember when it first came out, I was very hesitant to use it. But once you use it, you see other people using it, people get comfortable, and it becomes ingrained, it becomes the norm. I see telemedicine potentially becoming like that. I guess for us, what is the innovation in that space? What new technologies, new platform, new business model is going to make this be more penetrate within the market? That's something to look out for us.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And the whole area of telemedicine almost warrants its own webinar. But I think it's fair to say the pandemic has really accelerated adoption amongst clinicians and hospitals and providers that just 2-3 years ago were a bit reluctant to take it on. Now let's focus on perhaps the main topic of today's webinar discussion on strategic partnerships and really between multinationals and startups in the industry. And obviously, as we know, they can all take different forms. It can be an outright M&A, it can be a minority investment, it can be a clinical research collaboration, technology or IP licensing, distribution agreements, and so on. What are some of the types of strategic partnerships that you come across more often in APAC, whether you're actively involved in them or whether you were just getting inquiries from startups? And are these different types of strategic partnerships typically handled by different groups and different departments within your company? And Florian, I'll turn to you perhaps first on that.
Yes, okay. So as you mentioned, Fredrik, it's a broad. We have different opportunities to approach with startups. So maybe starting with the partnership model. Yeah. So this is a quite common use case. We try to implement it. As I mentioned before, when you look into the past, we had a clear focus on US and Europe, but not such a focus on Asia Pacific. We saw the gap here in our strategy. That's the reason why we are now partnering with MedTech Innovator in Asia Pacific to get closer to that community here in Asia Pacific. So partnership is a good model to really, if we have both the same interest, to come up with a solution which fits both for us and really exploring together what is in for us both. Yeah. So we are trying to use and use this kind of collaborative approach to explore which kind of direction this endeavor goes and if we are willing to take it to the next level. So that's for me the first step of really a kind of collaborative approach. This is typically handled by some colleagues in the regions, but mainly based on the fact that the main department is sitting in Europe, so in Germany. We are quite centralized in that element. That means also looking into how we are set up as Siemens Healthineers. We have a quite strong central organization. They are responsible for the pure R&D roadmap, defining which areas of interest and so on. And typically the Asia Pacific region is more like a sales and service organization, looking more into the how to come up and have the go-to-market approach. Yeah? So that is the reason why after identifying a potential candidate for a collaboration or any kind of other option, we then engage back to the colleagues in the headquarters and they are taking over more or less. Yeah? And they are also, in most of the cases, telling us what kind of interest they have and then coming up with a solution to work together with the startups. We have now implemented, especially in India, because we see a lot of startups in India. We have now a team of 2 persons sitting in India taking care about that one, and a particular team in China. The rest of Asia Pacific, I would say, I think JNJ is much better equipped here and have a stronger footprint when it comes to connecting to the startups in Asia Pacific, when it comes to the early stage startups here. Maybe Stephen, you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, Stephen, please. Thanks, Florian.
Yeah, thanks for acknowledging that, Florian. Appreciate that. And JNJ Innovation was basically set up to look for early stage innovation, because we know that we can't do it alone, right? So we want to tap into the agility and the innovation that's happening outside of J&J. And for this, we have created a micro ecosystem consisting of infrastructure, capital, deal sourcing, and deal execution via the tools that fall under the J&J Innovation umbrella. And that consists of the innovation centers, and that's the business unit that I work for. but it also includes J Labs. And J Labs are, of course, our incubators. But what's unique about the J Labs is that once you become a resident company, you get access to the J&J's resources, ranging from commercial expertise to drug development or medical device, innovation, regulatory expertise, etc. Then we also have JJDC, which is our corporate VC arm, so you can get access to capital. So we have, through these three business units or tools, the external partners can basically plug into these tools to help accelerate the development of their innovation. And it could be a combination of these tools as well. We also work with late-stage opportunities through our BD colleagues. So it's not just about early innovation. We're all working towards one J&J goal. Our goal is to look for that innovation that can help the patients, help the doctors, so that there's a better patient outcome. In terms of the type of deals that we tend to execute at the JNJ Innovation, it ranges from anywhere to, say, a research collaboration to a licensing type of a contract, and anything in between. We try to leverage a flexible business model in essence to, again, accelerate the development of the external partners innovation. That's our goal.
Got it. And Stephen, with your experience in biopharma as well, I wanted just to ask you, because I know that we have one or two companies that in our cohort that are looking for potential strategic partnerships with pharmaceutical companies. Just very quickly, how might that sort of an out licensing deal, let's say for a drug delivery device company, how might an out licensing deal, what might that look like, and how, if at all, would it be different negotiating with a pharmaceutical company as opposed to a medical device multinational?
I think J&J's strength is that we play across the three different businesses, right? Pharmaceuticals, medical device, and consumer healthcare. And the three businesses speak to each other and leverage and try to better understand and offer our better understanding of the space to our external partners. For drug delivery related opportunities, we consider these as platform technologies. And we have a business unit called the DPDS that actually looks at these opportunities. And they try to partner with therapeutic areas. These are disease areas within the pharmaceuticals. And we have 6 main therapeutic areas ranging from oncology to, say, immunology. And we also have these cross sectors. And these are business units that converge across the 6 disease areas. So the DPDS that looks at these platform technologies would want to see if it's able to address some of the unmet needs of the therapeutic areas, let's say for oncology. So, or maybe I'll use a recent example. One of the unmet need is the slow release of drugs inside the eye. If there's a drug delivery platform that's able to achieve that, say, greater than 6 months, that's something that we will look at, and DPDS will work with the relevant therapeutic area to see if this is on target for us. So the typical process would include first a more sort of a non-confidential engagement to see what they have, and if that looks good, our internal R&D will want to learn more under a CDA, and that gets executed. And if the discussion progresses, we'll think about how best to partner with that external partner, whether it be through a research collaboration, a co-development, or maybe the opportunity is already ready for a licensing discussion, so we can go through that.
That's helpful, Stephen. Thank you for that. Just a quick reminder to our startups in the cohort, if you have any questions that you want to address during the closed door 30 minutes here after the hour, do put those into the Q&A. Florian, question for you. At what stage typically during the development of a startup or a smaller company do you suggest they should make a first contact with Siemens Healthineers? Is there sort of a sweet spot in terms of that timing? Is it after a particular milestone, a particular regulatory approval, or are you really only interested once they're generating revenue? What are your perspectives on that?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, to be honest, because it's hard to answer, because Siemens Healthineers, as I mentioned in the beginning, is quite focused on the different particular fields. So we have quite successful products in most of the fields where we are dealing in. So who should approach us and when? In general, if it's a very successful product and a solution which fits into our portfolio, be our guest and contact us in any stage you are in. But I think just on the history, looking what we have done so far within Siemens Healthineers, I think it's good to have a level reached where you are talking about the product and not only about the vision and the idea what you want to do. So if you are not able to really show clinical benefits, or is it a product which is able to show that it's working, I think that is not fitting to the typical request from Siemens Healthineers M&A teams, where they are looking into a solution business and not just about ideas. So does it has to be a completely clinical trial before we approach us? Definitely not, but it should be a product which is somehow understandable and shows results, clinical, or it comes to process and so on. So this is, I think, if you're looking into Siemens Healthineers, how we approach it, I think it's better to really come up with a solution which is already a product level. Looking also a bit, just sharing about what happened so far within Siemens Healthineers, I can think about that 3 buckets mainly. So we have if we have a portfolio gap or a cool innovation, is like a ECG trigger which helps us to do the diagnosis with the MR better or whatever. All these kind of add-ons to the product. This can be an early stage, and we are looking for smart solutions in that area. But typically, we are looking for a portfolio gap, like a software solution for post-processing, where we say, okay, we are not having a good own developed solution. Maybe somebody on the market has it, and we are looking into, and here it can be different stage. But the other main more promising ones are like our robotic solutions from Corindos, where we bought that company. Corindos, this was already a product, but it had not the market access. So we were at Siemens Healthineers the perfect partner in some elements to come up with the go-to-market and approach globally, not only on focus countries, but a global approach, and make this really innovative solution coming to the next level of performance. And of course, the big acquisition with Varian, where we look into a complete company we are acquiring, because we are merging 2 market leaders in the oncology arena and then imaging. Combining this shows that we have a lot of opportunities for the future to come with an even stronger solution when it comes to oncology offerings. So these are 3 different bucket thinking processes we have when we look into what we want to have in our portfolio as additional element.
Yeah, good point. Stephen, is there a downside from your perspective and from J&J's perspective for startups potentially entering into a strategic partnership with another company too early? For example, would you view a startup differently if they already have an existing partnership with one of your major competitors? And does the nature of that partnership matter? So, for example, is if they're in a joint research project with a competitor, that's fine. But if they own 10% of the startup, maybe you wouldn't touch it with a stick. What are some of J&J's perspectives and thoughts on
that? I guess
sensitive question, perhaps.
It depends, I think, is the right answer for that, right? It's a complicated issue. To be in partnership with our competitor is an issue, of course, but it also depends on the situation. If it's on a different asset, different innovation that the company is working on, then I don't see any major issues there because we're blocked off from different technologies. But if the competitor is a shareholder in that company, that will probably make us think twice, I suppose, right? So it depends on. So I've been on the both sides of the equation. I've been involved in the startups myself. I've led a few startups myself before joining J&J. And the question of going back to the question raised to Florian about when is the optimal timing for the startups to engage big pharma or big medtech companies, that's a complicated balancing act, right? But I'm a firm believer in engaging early on to build a relationship, because I think in the end that will help the startups and also the medtech companies, because to some degree the deals are done and facilitated if the relationship is there. If the two party understands each other better when you go into the term sheet stage, I feel that that helps the process and makes it more smoother. So from that sense, my personal view on this is to engage early, learn from the medtech companies what the needs are, what the market's needs are. It is a fast changing market, right? Especially in the medtech space compared to, say, pharmaceuticals. And getting that insight from the big players could be very helpful for you, because maybe you want to pivot very quickly if you see that the market is going in a different direction. And you can't get that without building that relationship with the medtech partners. So that's one. So, again, going back, it really depends on the situation. Yeah.
I think those are great insights, Stephen. Thanks for that. And I'll ask Florian's perspective here in just a moment. But certainly, what I hear you saying is engage early, but think twice about inviting a big multinational in as an investor too early, because that might jeopardize potential conversations that a startup might want to have with other multinationals in that same space. Florian, any downside for startups do you see by engaging too early with a strategic?
Yeah, I think that's Stephen mentioned some very good points. Yeah, so if you are already partnering with one other or a competitor somehow, you're out of the game for the other ones. Yeah, so that's quite simple, and everything what you can do is in that early stage, as I mentioned, if you're just talking about the idea which maybe help others, it's good to have that idea, but then you have to come up with a product, and you should also think about, is it something where you have a unique solution on? Yeah, because I think it's really tough if you have an idea and you know that others already also have that idea, and then you are approaching multinationals. I think that is a tough one, yeah, because really the differentiation has to be crystal clear at that point. So if you're not able to differentiate yourself, I think you should think again and then approaching the multinationals.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Now let's maybe focus our discussions a little bit on the ultimate strategic partnership, the M&A. And apparently I was just reading 2021 has so far been a very good year for MedTech M&A. There have been more deals in MedTech M&A in the first half of this year than in all of 2020. So that's interesting and encouraging. And of course, inorganic growth is something that's been driving growth in the medtech sector for a long time. J&J made a number of acquisitions. I think there was a major one in pharma just a year ago, and of course there was another big one in medtech, was Auris Health in robotics for about 3-4 billion just 1 or 2 years ago, and the other big one, of course, concluded this year, as Florian mentioned earlier, is Siemens acquisition of Varian Medical Systems. But which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Florian, was about 16-17 billion. So a very, very sizable deal, and probably
it was the biggest deal Siemens came up with. So Siemens has a long history, but it was the biggest deal ever.
Yes.
But it's only possible to pay such amount of money because that is already a market leader. Yeah. So you would not invest such amount of money if you were in an idea or any other. But it was a rock solid company, which a very solid profit line, and also with the growth ambition which fits. And we also see that synergy effects. Yeah. So is it, of course, you're thinking about cost synergies, but the main discussion about bringing these two companies was about growth ambitions. Yeah. It was about what can we do more together, and that was a very interesting exercise. And I'm in the middle of it at the moment, because we are now thinking about what our projects we can do together, and even do a better solution for our customers in the future, looking also in the R&D world. But it is already, you can see, combining a very strong image provider and a treatment solution. This is already a benefit, and we worked already closely together in the past, but now bringing that two big forces together, that's, I think, it's a benefit for everybody. It's a patient, the doctors, everybody who's working with the machine. So I'm really excited about that acquisition.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. 1 + 1 always has to equal 3 or 5 or 12 or some other multiple. But if we talk now about M&A of smaller companies, what typically is your strategy behind smaller acquisitions, and are they always tuck-in acquisitions, or do you invest in new and potentially transformative startups with the aim of building completely new business areas? Florian, maybe I'll continue with you.
Yeah. So we have, I would say, a medium track record for that one. Most of them are quite big. I talked about Corindos, which is a nice addition to our offering in the treatment area. But the other than I can talk about is ECG consulting. So we invested in a company in the US who are doing consulting business for hospitals at the moment. So that was a additional aspect of our enterprise service arena, where we're looking into value partnerships, working together in the consulting arena with our customers. So it doesn't always have to be a clinical driven decision or a product. It's also about bringing more services to our customer, more meaningful discussions with the customer. So it's a broad range. And into the clinical arena, we have also some smaller one. We have bought a company in Germany 2 years ago, Neo Oncology, to have more in that molecular biology area, some solutions to provide. But in general, I think we are looking more into the big announcements of course, covering big companies we are buying. But we also have, of course, some acquisitions which are additional offering elements. Yeah, so it's like, is it like an X-ray system and add on to the solution? And then it's typically more like a software development, a piece which fits as an adjacent field to what we are already offering. And that's quite fitting. And that's exactly what all the other companies are also doing in that arena. Maybe it is another element of our offering and fitting. But again, that's a big difference. For example, like Medtronic, and which have a very broad offering. We have a very focused one, and imaging is the core. Diagnostic is this other element now with oncology treatment, but it has to fit to our portfolio. And if it's fitting and bringing additional benefits and combining two worlds, then it's definitely worth a thought.
Yeah, great point. And Stephen, J&J's strategy behind smaller acquisitions, and and whether they're all tuck-ins or you are open to invest in completely new transformative startups.
I can't comment too much on that because I see extensive focus on research collaboration and licensing.
Yeah.
But we do, of course, acquisition through our BD colleagues, and you mentioned about a big acquisition done back in 2019, and that was the ARIS. And that's, from what I understand, the engagement happened very early on. There was a company with a stellar cast of innovators, Fred Moll, for example, who was basically the father of robotics, right? Intuitive, Da Vinci system, etc. And going in, we knew that there was something special about the company, and eventually ended up being an acquisition target for us. And that was, as you said, over 3 billion in cash, but combined, I think it was amounting up to more than $5 billion. So we have those big ticket items. For smaller opportunities, acquisition opportunities, I think we want to ensure that we're adding value. So we want to make sure that we have the know-hows of the technology that we're going to acquire. That could be important. But at the same time, there could be gaps, and I can see us also investing to fill those gaps that we don't have the internal know-how. Therefore, acquiring the company and the people in it will help us to acquire those new set of know-hows. That could happen as well. So that's, I think, where we stand.
Yeah, and thanks, Stephen. Are acquisitions typically executed by your Asia Pacific team locally, or does it always go back to your HQ in the US when it comes to due diligence and so on?
Yeah, I mean, we have JNJ Innovation is unique in that we're not centralized, right? We have these various business units placed across the huts, what we call it, the hubs of innovations. Innovation Center, for example, is located in Boston, San Francisco, London, and Shanghai. And through those offices, we look for innovation. But for acquisition type of opportunities, I would say it will go to our global. In fact, the deals that we make at the innovation centers will also go to global as well. But we are working in teams, right? And it's a mixture of global stakeholders, internal stakeholders, and regional stakeholders putting in their insights to make the deal happen. It's a team sport.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. Florian, if you were to look back on some of Siemens Healthineers' prior deals, does it make things easier if there is, and I think we touched on this briefly earlier, if there is a pre-existing relationship, does that make the acquisition easier or faster? Whether it's a co-development agreement, distribution agreement, or some other licensing agreement. And typically are those acquisitions, are they initiated by you, or do you most often get approached by the startup?
Maybe to talk about that approaching one, are the startups coming to us? I would say yes, because based on the fact that we have that very focused in portfolio, the companies who are in that arena know us. They know what we are offering, and they maybe know about where we have a gap, and coming to us. So that's also one of the reasons why we are not so active in these kind of communities in Asia, in Americas, for example, because typically the companies are coming to us. That should not sound arrogant or whatever. It's just a matter of fact that we are typically approached by startups when they have an offering. But it's different in Asia Pacific, and that's the reason why we are taking a different approach here in Asia Pacific. Here it's more like we are actively searching for solutions and partners in that area. And to your initial question about, is it easier if you have already existing relationship? I would say yes, because it's much easier, the whole due diligence. If you know your person you are in contact with, you know who is driving the business, who is have a good understanding, and this is much easier in the process if you have already that relationship. If you're going to somebody you don't know and just say, oh, your offering is interesting, we want to buy you, that's of course a different level of discussion. And therefore I would say, yes, it's of course better to have a first initial partnership, collaborative approach in a clinical trial or whatever, to come up with a much faster solution when it comes to the M&A.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Stephen, wanted to ask, and I'll ask this to both of you, what typically in a startup gets your attention? What are the qualities that you look for in a small company that's a prospective M&A target? And is there anything that the startup could do to make that approach more productive or successful? Stephen, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, so again, our deals tends to be or fall into the bucket of research collaborations and licensing. But I would imagine our BD colleagues who work on M&A will also look at the following variables. Ultimately, we're going to focus on the data. It's about the innovation. And we're talking about transformative innovation. We're not looking for incremental, although those opportunities we do execute on. But at the Innovation Center, the name innovation is there for a reason. We look for the transformative opportunities. So one, credibility of the science. Is it innovative? Is the data sound? Two, are the scientists working on this credible? That's also very important. And that's going back to this idea of the people who are going to execute on the science and the business, right? We do put a lot of emphasis on that too. Then, it's about also making a fair deal, not just for us, but for the external partners. And we want to make sure that is captured during our discussions. So those are the three that I can think of: about the science, about the people that's going to execute it, and making sure that it's a fair deal. Those are the things I would look at.
Yep, thanks. Great points. And Florian, what are the qualities typically that you look for in a?
I think that's very valid what you've mentioned here. Just adding a different perspective to it. For me, it's like if I look also in the MedTech Innovator and that big database and searching for something which maybe fits and so on. For me, it's about the USP. Yeah, it's in the differentiation between to others. So what is the competitive landscape, and are you really unique in the offering? Yeah, so that is something where you when you as a startup approaching a multinational, I think you should always think about what is your USP to differentiate yourself, and what is the reason why we should invest, partner, or whatever. And the next one is, I already like to mention that if you came to that point, you have the possibility to pitch to a group of people in a multinational. Make sure you understand who you are pitching to, and make the pitch relevant for the people you're having in front of you. That means that one size fits all. You go the first day, you go to vendor A, and tomorrow to vendor B, and number C. You just exchange the first slide, which is a different name on that slide, a different brand logo, and then having the same pitch again. Maybe that will not fit. Yeah. So think about who is your audience, and also adapt the message and the story to it. Yeah. And I'm always loving to see a presentation which is really tailored to my needs, and not just to a general presentation I have put together a year ago, and I'm using and pitch to everybody. Yeah. That is something which really makes a difference, and shows also not only with respect to the people who are listening, but also connecting to the people in a way that you have the possibility to show that you are the only one who are seeing that.
That's great advice, and I will ask you both about specific advice for startups, but I think that's very, very helpful. And maybe before we get to the final round of advice here, and it's coming up to the hour. Quick reminder to our startups in the cohort: do put your questions into the Q&A. or into the chat, and we will address them here at 11 o'clock. Stephen, what common mistakes do you see among startups that approach you, whether it's for M&A or BD&L? And this may not be the right question for you, given that you're less involved in direct transactions, but does it help if the target company brings along a banker or an M&A advisory firm or some other senior consultant, or does that complicate things? So your thoughts on common mistakes that you see among startups that approach you?
I am actually involved in transactions now.
Okay, good. Then you can comment on that as well.
Within the organization. So, my main advice is to do your homework. Going back to what Florian had mentioned, tailor make your presentation to suit your audience, right? And that's very important. In the region, English may not be your first choice of communication, right? So English may not be the best way for you to articulate, but I think your organizational skills, your thought process shows up in your presentation, regardless of how fluent you are in your English. And we want to see that, because that can also translate to whether you can execute, right? So that's important. Whether it helps to work with a banker or other advisors, that depends. That depends on the relationship that the banker has or the advisor has. I think that's mainly the reason why one would want to work with them, to open up more doors through the advisors network. And some of the advisors are, very, they are experts as well. They have a scientific background and they can speak both the business and the scientific lingo, so that can help. And the platform that they represent can, of course, also open up doors. So it's about the platform, the banks that they represent, and it's about the individual, whether they have the right network and is able to articulate your business to people like ourselves. So again, unfortunately, it really depends, would be my answer for that one. I wanted to talk a little bit about, when to approach us. And I talked about 3 criteria that we use to assess the opportunity, but there's a 4th element to this, and maybe it's somewhat tied to when should you approach companies like J&J. We like to really get, engaged. It's good to make that relationship and build that relationship through early engagement, but when it's really going to move the needle for you is when you have scoped out what the milestones are, and if J&J gets involved, we're going to really speed up reaching those milestones for you. And when we see that as well, I think that will make your case a lot stronger.
Great insights there, Stephen. Thanks for adding that. We are reaching the top of the hour. Final question from me: how can startups that do want to reach out to Siemens Healthineers or to Johnson & Johnson, how can they contact you? What would you recommend they do? And if there are any other items of sort of final advice that you might have to companies that you haven't already mentioned. I think certainly the advice about doing your homework and tailoring presentations and so on are absolutely critical and a very useful takeaway for our cohort here. But thoughts on what companies can do to reach out to you, and if there are any final parting words before we end our YouTube live stream. Florian. I think you might be on mute, Florian.
Oh yeah, thank you. Sorry.
No worries.
But there is a central organization taking care about that. Startup communities in the headquarters. They are the main entry point for any contacts you want to have. So happy to share this kind of email if you approach me. No worries. But in general, that is a central organization taking care about that one. Other than that, we are actively searching for it. So maybe you will be contacted by us, and that's the best case, because then we are really interested in everything what we are doing. That's it.
Very, very, very good. So wait for Florian's call. Stephen.
So for the MedTech space, I am the main point of contact for early innovation for the region. So please reach out to me. And for North Asia, and that's Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Korea, I am also the main point of contact for opportunities across the three sectors: consumer healthcare, medical device, as well as pharmaceutical. So reach out to me if you have something innovative.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Any final words of advice, that anything that we haven't covered yet from either Florian or Stephen?
I think I covered my advices. Think about who you want to approach and what do you want to really get out of that conversation with the multinational. Yeah. So if you're looking for a partner, discuss on a partner level. If you want to be a part of a merger and acquisition, then make that clear. I think that's the two advices I wanted to do with the final statement.
Great. Thank you. We're just over the hour. Thank you.
If I may also.
Yeah, of course, Stephen.
And with a parting word,
I
would say, this has been a very fun panel discussion. So thank you for organizing this, Frederick and Paul. But my, parting words that I would like to share with the startup is that persevere, be patient, right, and be nice to your spouses.
Great point. Well, on that note, thank you both, Florian and Stephen. It was great to have you on the panel. Terrific discussion. Don't hang up. We will part ways with our viewers on YouTube, and we will continue. So to our cohort and to Stephen and Florian, stay on the line. We'll go into our closed door Q&A in just a moment, but we'll say thanks and see you next week to our YouTube viewers.
Thank you very much, and have a good day.